More of the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
Recapping the 2017 NFL Draft right here on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. It is the Zach Gelb Show on this Monday. We'll talk a lot of Eagles, we'll talk a lot of Giants, and also recap what the Jets did in this draft. And now let's go out to the phone line. You've heard my thoughts on what the three local teams did. Now let's get more of the national feel with Pro Football Focus's very own Jeff Ratcliffe, who is kind enough to hop on board with us right now. Jeff, we appreciate a few minutes. Thanks for the time, and how are you?
I'm fantastic. I was actually in Philly for the draft. It was quite an event, but it's a nice release that it is all over at this point.
It was unbelievable because I live in Philadelphia, and we were down there broadcasting on Thursday and Friday, and just to see how many fans were there and how loud the Philadelphia fan was, and this is what we opened up the show with. I thought Philadelphia hit it out of the park, and they did a sensational job, Jeff.
And, not to knock Chicago, because I was out there last year for what they did, and I thought it was incredible. And then Philly, it was 15 times bigger, and I'm not exaggerating. It was tremendous, so exciting. And for Philadelphia, it was a very peaceful and friendly event.
I think it's great, and especially there was no arrest and there was no citation, so kudos to Philadelphia. They behaved, and I know a lot of people were pessimistic that would be the case. So once again, I can't give any more words of praise to the Philadelphia fan for the job that they did. But now everyone talks about, the draft should be in Philadelphia every year, and I don't agree with that. I think that they should rotate it from city to city, but I have to expect that Philadelphia, after the showing they got with all the impressions and the great response, even from Bill Belichick chiming in, they got to become in a rotation for this. I'd have to imagine every few years, no?
Oh, I certainly think so. And it'd be nice if they had it again next year, but yeah, that's good I agree. You should rotate it around the country. There are so many great fans throughout this country that other cities certainly deserve this great event as well.
Well, they set the bar, and they set the bar very high. All right, let's talk about the Eagles and what they did. First round, 14th overall, they take the defensive end out of Tennessee and Derek Barnett. Your evaluation and your thoughts on the pick of Derek Barnett?
Well, I know that there was certainly some folks out there who weren't necessarily enthusiastic about the pick, but you look at Barnett, strong edge player. Other than Myles Garrett, he was the best edge in this class. Solomon Thomas, a little bit more of a tweener. He's kind of got some Michael Bennett to his game, so he can kick into the interior. I had Barnett as my number 5 overall player in this draft, so a little bit unconventional. He's not that massive guy on the edge, but he can bring some speed. And, when they're running a wide 9, you have a slightly undersized Brandon Graham, slightly undersized Derek Barnett, but just flying off the edge. It's going to be pretty impressive, so hopefully he hits the ground running, but I expect him to this year.
And I was hearing his coach speak, and I was even hearing him speak earlier today, and he just talks about right away that explosiveness right off the line of scrimmage that he's able to create. It seems like it's something very special. You said he was your 5th player in this draft. Who did you have before Derek Barnett?
So on the big board, of course, first overall, Myles Garrett. Then I had Jamal Adams, a safety out of LSU, Marshawn Lattimore, and then Jonathan Allen. That was it.
Okay. With Allen, were you surprised a little bit how far that he fell?
There are some mocks that actually had him falling like that. I just feel like he was a guy who just slightly got overlooked. So it wasn't a shock that he fell. It was just, he fell into their laps. It was a great value pick where he went. He could have been a top 5 pick if he came out last year, though. He's just a versatile guy who's just all around a solid football player.
Now, looking at what else the Eagles did, let's attack rounds 2 and 3. Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas. Your thoughts on those two players?
Well, you're addressing a position of need. Unfortunately, with Jones, you're going to have to wait. Obviously, get the red shirt year very likely here. I just don't see a situation where he gets back onto the field very quickly. So you have that, which if it pans out, you got tremendous value. He was a potentially top 15 pick there. In terms of Douglas, you're getting a guy who potentially can get on the field immediately, bigger-bodied corner. Not a fast guy, but he had a nose for the football. I think that's a good thing there for the Eagles. So, hey, they went out, they addressed the position of need, and you can't really fault that.
With Sidney Jones, and I know it's a wait-and-see thing, but just going a little bit step further with it, you have some people that say, why would you do that? Why would you put yourself in a situation picking that high? How big of a risk do you think it is to pick someone that, with the Achilles injury, we all know about that, in the second round of a draft?
I think it's risk reward at this point. I think if he went on day one, it would have been just a bit too much. But pick 43, that feels about right. We saw the Cowboys do that with Jalen Smith last year as well. This kid, if he pans out, he could be Marcus Peters. In fact, that's his workout buddy. I mean, they have a very similar game for a reason. And we've seen how successful Marcus Peters has been so far in his career.
Now, two more things on the Eagles draft before we get into the Giants and the Jets. Pumphrey, the running back, we all know what he was able to accomplish, and it was unprecedented in college football. But he didn't go until the fourth round. I know a lot of people weren't surprised about that. Why wasn't he a little bit taken earlier in this draft? What did people don't think is very impressive about his game?
Well, it's not his game, it's his size. And, 5'8", 176 at the combine. And the thing about that 176 is it's not like, well, he has room to go up to about 190. No, he's maxed out on that frame. So he is a little guy, but, he's been told this his entire life, and he is one of those kids who plays with a chip on his shoulder. There is a reason why he put up the numbers he put up, because he has that anger and that fire in him. The other thing that's interesting about him at San Diego State, he was running between the tackles despite being this little guy. So he has experience to do that. But, I mean, at that size, I want to see my running backs at least at 200 pounds to hold up to the wear and tear at the NFL level. So I don't expect him to ever be even a Brian Westbrook type. But heir apparent to Darren Sproles certainly could be that.
Yeah, not a bad landing spot to learn a little bit from Darren Sproles, and we'll see how much reps he does get for this upcoming season as we're talking to Jeff Ratcliffe from Pro Football Focus right now on the Zach Gelb Show. Another thing that I like that the Eagles did, and they approached it a little bit later, in the fourth round and then also in the fifth round, they take wide receivers. I think that puts a little bit more pressure on Aguilar and DGB, and we'll see more of a competition coming up with the Eagles, and maybe those guys will be sweating a little bit more.
Yeah, and you see what they went after here. They went after deep threats, and we saw them address that in free agency with Torrey Smith. Mac Hollins, size and speed, so 6'4", 220, but ran 4'5". Now, 4'5", people say, oh, well, that's not fast compared to John Ross. When you're 6'4", that is really fast. So you certainly like the speed that he has. And then Shelton Gibson, that's pretty much his game. I actually comped Sheldon Gibson to a poor man's Deshaun Jackson. We know the Philly fans have wanted Deshaun back. Well, this kid has that water bug ability to get downfield, blow the top off the defense. So the question, though, I mean, they're fourth and fifth round talent. The question is, did we find a diamond in the rough with these guys or not? And that certainly, like you said, is going to put some pressure on the other folks on this depth chart.
And worst case with Matt Collins, everyone raves about his special teams play. Tell me a little bit about what he does so well on the special teams side of it.
Yeah, I think, that speed certainly helps. He gets after it. And then, when you have a guy who's coming after you at 6'4", 220 and trucking you, that's certainly a good thing. And, willing to do it too. And that's what separates some of these guys, that ability to play on special teams is one of the reasons why they make the 53-man roster and not the practice squad. So I do like Collins' chances of being on that 53-man.
Now, let's get to the Giants. Evan Ingram. A lot of fans, it wouldn't have surprised you if the Giants went with the tight end, but a lot of people thought it would have been Njoku out of Miami. Evan Ingram, how do you project him on the next level?
It's really interesting because he's a wide receiver pretty much. He's not a tight end in a traditional sense. He's definitely the move type Jordan Reed style tight end, which, now they have Odell Beckham Jr. They got Brandon Marshall in free agency. They've had Sterling Shepard last year as a rookie. They could be running a lot of four wide. That's what my takeaway is here. And that creates a lot of mismatches. Now, they didn't really address the running back position. It looks like Paul Perkins is essentially solidified as their top running back. I mean, they did draft Corey Clement, or not Corey Clement, that's who signed with the Eagles. I'm sorry, Wayne Gallman. I've mixed those two guys up through the pre-draft process like 100 times. Wayne Gallman, who doesn't really overly excite me. He's a kid who has NFL size, but not really NFL athleticism. So, for for that position, they're not going to get a lot done, but it's going to be hard to defend when they go 4 wide with Ingram on the field.
Yeah, I understand that from the receiving aspect of it, because there's a lot of times you get these shorter routes and the Giants tight ends, they'll have brick hands and they won't catch the football. And I'm not really knocking the Evan Ingram pick, but I was just so surprised they waited until the 6th round to go offensive line. I know this isn't a deep draft and wasn't a really high review draft when it comes to offensive linemen, but it's great that you have all those weapons, but if you can't block, that's going to be the downfall really of this Giants team this year.
Yeah, I guess if we could say anything about Eric Flowers is that, I mean, he was better in 2016 than he was in 2015.
Not
but
saying
he was really
much.
Terrible those years. Yeah, you're exactly right. It's just this draft class was so rough at offensive line. Some were saying this was the best tight end class ever and the worst offensive line class ever. So, I agree. Maybe they could have found value earlier, but that's going to be a big concern, especially for Eli Manning. Now, he doesn't take a lot of sacks, but, he gets rid of that ball very quickly, and that could be a problem.
Now, I was talking to Ramchick, and I was also talking to Robinson at an event right before the draft on Wednesday. And Robinson basically said his communication was very, small. It was minimal with the Giants. Ramchick said they had a visit and they had a lot more communication. Why didn't they like the offensive line position with Ramchick and also Robinson?
I'm really not sure. I could not answer that question. I thought there was a good chance that they could have went with Ramchick in that first round. He slips 10 picks past them or whatever it was to the Saints. Baffling to me, and Robinson could have been there too, early day 2 pick. It would have addressed a concern for them, but, maybe who knows what they have up their sleeves. Maybe it's just nothing.
All right, let's get to the Jets. Can you explain to me how Jamal Adams fell to 6? Because I still don't get that one.
Yeah, I maybe it's still a bit of the old guard. We can't draft safeties early mentality. He's ultra talented, and obviously now in this era where we have a lot of these two-way guys, because he can play two-way, he can play down in the box. If you wanted him to play single high, you could play him. You're not going to play him single high, but if you wanted to, you could. It's surprising to me. Like I said, number 2 on my board. There's a few foundational players in this draft. I think Myles Garrett is one. I think Jamal Adams is another one of them.
Now, I'll tell you something, because this draft was one of the more wackier ones in recent memory. And even going into it, you had a feel it was going to be that case, because there's some years you could give a handful of picks of who's going to go where. But even leading up to this draft, you had some speculation on who would be the number 1 pick, whether it be the quarterback out of UNC or Myles Garrett. But you really saw the tone of this draft and how bizarre it was with the 2nd overall pick, where you had the Bears giving up a lot to trade up. Just after all this time having it sit in, do you still get any explanation? And what's your explanation on what the Bears did, giving up all that to move up 1 spot?
For me, I'd have to read between the lines, and I think that part of this may have to do with a regime that's looking to get a little bit of a longer leash. There's nothing that's reported on that, but sometimes you have to look into those things. This is a team with a defense on the rise. They have a running back who could be, darn good for the next several years in Jordan Howard. They have some upside talent at wide receiver. They just didn't have the quarterback, so they invested, obviously, in Mike Glennon. If they have Trubisky, maybe this regime gets an extra year or 2. That's the only thing I can really come up with to jump that high up and get Trubisky. I think they could have. They certainly could have got him potentially a little bit later, but they really set the tone, and then that changed the whole complexion of that first half of the draft.
Out of Mitch, Watson, and then also Mahomes, how would you rank those 3 quarterbacks and their potential in this league?
Well, I mean, from day one, it's certainly Mahomes has the best resume. He's the most ready to start this year. But I think in the long haul, if Andy Reid can work his magic with Patrick Mahomes, he will end up having the best career. That is a bold statement because he's coming into the league very close to his floor. I mean, he athletically is off the charts. He can make every throw you want him to make. The problem is he can't run the play that was called, and he came from that crazy air raid system at Texas Tech. But if he can learn actually how to be a quarterback, an actual NFL quarterback with all of his physical gifts, he could be very, very special. So, day one, I like Watson the most out of these guys, but over the long haul, I think Mahomes is the most intriguing.
How long do you think it's going to take Watson to get on the field with Houston? I could see that being pretty quickly now.
I think he's a week one starter. I can't see a scenario where they're going out there with Tom Savage under center.
Now, Jeff Ratcliffe, before we let you run from Pro Football Focus, you saw Fournette and McCaffrey both go in the top 10. We all know they sat out their bowl games. What do you think that does for the future of not only running backs, but a lot of players that, they know they're going to go early in the draft and they're not playing in a major bowl game and they elect to sit it out?
I think it's going to be a trend. Yeah, and we've seen in the past players who've gotten hurt towards the end of the season or in the bowl game where that ultimately costs them money. Let's just be honest about this. It's a business, and it's a business decision that these kids made. So I think it is going to set a trend, and who knows, there could be ripple effects there ultimately for bowl games beyond that. We know that obviously the landscape has changed recently with the playoffs. Maybe the landscape could change more dramatically in the next decade.
Hey, Jeff, one more that just popped up into my head before we let you run, just in terms of fantasy, because people are going to get prepared and get all ready for the draft. Out of this rookie class, who do you think the best fantasy player is coming up this year?
It's not going to be what people want to hear, but it is Corey Davis for me, and the reason is pretty simple. He's going to be in a great opportunity to be the number one wide receiver for a rising quarterback. And if you look at it just from a long-term standpoint, if you're in those dynasty leagues, wide receivers have a much longer shelf life than running backs. I do like McCaffrey. I think Fournette is a stud, but if I had the first overall pick in a rookie draft, it's going to be Corey Davis, and I think Corey Davis actually has the biggest impact in regular fantasy leagues as well as a rookie this year.
Well, Jeff, we appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.